All right, so get this. We're going deep into the story of Moses today. You've given us all these biblical study guides and commentaries on Exodus. It's like a whole stack of them. And our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to dig out all the cool historical insights and theological nuggets we can find.
What's amazing to me is that it's not just a story,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're talking ancient Egypt, a civilization with a pantheon of over 1,500 gods. Can you imagine that? Like a god for almost every single aspect of life?
Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot of gods to keep track of. But before we get to the burning bush and all the crazy stuff that happens, we got to kind of set the stage a bit. So we've got the Israelites enslaved in Egypt. And Pharaoh's a little freaked out by their growing numbers. You know how it is. So what does he do? He goes and decrees the death of all the newborn Hebrew boys.
And that's where the story takes a really interesting turn. The Bible tells us that Pharaoh's own daughter finds baby Moses and decides to raise him right there in the palace. Now, some of the sources we've got here actually suggest a pretty wild theory. Ready for this? Could this daughter be Hatshepsut, the woman who later ruled Egypt for over 20 years? A female pharaoh, no less.
Whoa, now that would be something else. Can you tell us a bit more about why some scholars think Hatshepsut might be the one who saved Moses? Like, what's the evidence?
Well, you see, if the traditional timeline for the Exodus is accurate, it means that Hatshepsut would have been a young princess when Moses was born. And let me tell you, her story is anything but ordinary. She defied all the norms, basically declared herself King Hatshepsut, and even went so far as to rock the ceremonial pharaoh's beard.
Wow, that's a powerful woman right there. Talk about breaking the mold. I mean, if she was willing to do all that, I guess saving a Hebrew baby wouldn't be totally out of character. But do the sources actually give any specific evidence to back this theory up?
They do. Some of them point to these old Egyptian engravings that show Hatshepsut having a super close relationship with her nursemaid. And get this, some folks believe that this nursemaid could actually be Jochebed, Moses' mom, from the Bible. Plus, later on, Hatshepsut even defied the reigning pharaoh, Thutmose III, which kind of fits with this idea of her being, strong-willed and independent.
That's a pretty fascinating possibility for sure. Adds a whole other layer to the story. Okay, so now we've got Moses, raised as an Egyptian prince, but always knowing deep down he's actually Hebrew. Then things get really intense when he kills an Egyptian and has to escape to Midian. He ends up spending 40 years there as a shepherd. Why are those 40 years so important? I mean, it's a long time.
It's easy to just kind of skim over those 40 years like they're just a timeout or something, but trust me, they're super important for understanding how Moses changes and grows. Just imagine the internal struggle. He's raised in total luxury, exposed to all the secrets of Egyptian power, and now he's living this simple life, taking care of sheep. I bet those years of solitude and reflection really shaped his character and got him ready for what was coming next.
It's like a classic hero's journey, a time of trials and growth before he's called to fulfill his destiny. And that call, well, it comes in a pretty dramatic way. The burning bush. I mean, picture this, right? Moses is out there with this flock just doing his thing, and boom, suddenly there's this bush totally engulfed in flames, but it's not burning up. No wonder he's curious.
And this isn't just some random fire,
Yeah.
It's a theophany. It's like a visible sign of the divine showing up right in front of him. And you got to notice how God speaks directly to him, to Moses. Moses. It's super personal. Like this standard is just for him, nobody else.
It gets even more interesting when God tells Moses to take off his sandals, because get this, he's standing on holy ground. Now, that might seem like a simple thing, but in ancient Egypt, with all those gods everywhere, that idea was pretty radical. What's so special about holy ground?
Well, back then in Egypt, most of the gods were tied to a specific place or part of nature. But the God of Abraham, he's different. Holy ground means a place set apart, a spot where the divine presence is like uniquely present. It's like a statement saying this God isn't limited like those Egyptian gods. He's something else entirely.
And then, to make things even clearer, Moses asks that super important question. What is his name? We got to remember, in ancient cultures, a name wasn't just a label. It was like a symbol of a god's power and territory. So Moses is basically asking about the source of this god's authority. Who are you really?
And the answer he gets is, well, it's pretty mind-blowing and kind of rebellious all at the same time. I am, WHO, I am. This idea of self-existence, it completely separates this God from all those Egyptian gods. It's a statement of pure power, not limited by any specific job or function. He just is.
That's a bold statement, especially in a culture where they were obsessed with assigning gods to every little thing, right? Like every aspect of life had its own god. This is a huge challenge to their whole belief system. And this is where we get the name Yahweh, isn't it?
You got it. The name Yahweh comes from the Hebrew phrase Ehe Asher Ehe, and it basically means I am, W-H-O, I am. It emphasizes that God is eternal and never changes. He exists totally independent of the created world. But it's more than just a name. It also means that this is a personal God who wants a relationship with his people, like a covenant.
So it's not just about power, it's about connection. And that connection is based on all those promises God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Promises that now he's ready to keep. But, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's court. He knows that sometimes words just aren't enough. He needs proof, tangible signs that this God is the real deal.
And that's where the miracles come in. God gives Moses 3 signs to prove his authority. First, his staff turns into a snake. Now, I know that might seem like a magic trick, but in ancient Egypt, that was a direct challenge to their serpent gods, like Etum, the creator god, and Wadjet, who protected Lower Egypt.
It's like God saying, hey, I've got power over the very symbols you worship. It's a pretty strategic way to undermine their whole belief system. So what are the other signs God gives Moses?
The second sign is even more personal. Moses' hand gets covered in leprosy, and then boom, it's healed instantly. That shows that God has power over life and health. And finally, to really drive the point home, water turns to blood. Now, this was a direct challenge to the Nile River, which was like the lifeblood of Egypt. They even had gods associated with it.
Wow, these aren't just random miracles. They're carefully chosen to hit the core of the Egyptian religion, right? It's a way to show that Yahweh is the ultimate power, even over the gods they worship. But how did the Israelites react to all of this? I mean, what's their response?
Well, the Bible tells us that they believe, they see these incredible signs, and they decide to put their faith in Yahweh. They finally have hope because this God, who's clearly more powerful than Pharaoh and all those Egyptian gods, has promised to free them from slavery.
That's a huge turning point. It sets the stage for this epic showdown between the God of the Israelites and the entire Egyptian pantheon.
And it begs the question, if Yahweh is so powerful, why not just free them right there on the spot? Why all the drama with the plagues and the confrontation with Pharaoh? Now that, my friend, is a question for our next deep dive. You're right to wonder why all that drama was necessary if Yahweh is really all-powerful. But we got to remember, we're not just talking about a physical rescue mission here. This is about a total clash of ideas, a challenge to the very heart of Egyptian society.
So it's not just about God snapping his fingers and poof, the Israelites are free. What's the deeper meaning behind this big clash?
Well, think about it. Pharaoh wasn't just some political dude. He was seen as a divine figure, a descendant of Horus himself. So when those plagues hit, they weren't just natural disasters, they were direct attacks on the entire Egyptian pantheon. Like God was systematically taking apart their belief system piece by piece.
So you're saying each plague was meant to challenge a specific Egyptian god. That's so cool. What are some examples of this, like this divine one-upmanship?
Okay, take the Nile turning to blood. That was a huge blow to Hapi, the god of the Nile. He was supposed to ensure the river was full of life and abundance, right? And then you've got the swarms of frogs and insects making a mockery of Hecate, who often had a frog's head and was linked to fertility and rebirth.
It's like God was saying, hey, your gods can't even control the basic stuff, like the weather or the creatures in their own domains. It's a pretty powerful message on so many levels.
Exactly. And the Egyptians, they totally got it. They weren't just experiencing some random natural disasters. Their whole religious worldview was being shaken to its core. Imagine what that would do to you, psychologically and spiritually, to see your gods seemingly powerless against this new force.
And what about Pharaoh himself? He's not just going to sit back and watch his power disappear, is he?
Nope, not a chance. The Bible says Pharaoh hardened his heart, refused to acknowledge Yahweh's power, even when his own advisors were begging him to let the Israelites go. It's that classic story of pride, blinding you to the truth, even when all the evidence is staring you in the face.
Yeah, that's a theme that keeps popping up throughout history, right? Leaders clinging to power, even when they're clearly on the wrong side.
Absolutely. And in Pharaoh's case, his stubbornness leads to that final, devastating plague, the death of all the firstborn sons. Now, that was a blow that struck at the very heart of what Egyptians believed.
Why was that specific plague so significant? I mean, I understand the tragedy of losing a child, but what made it such a decisive move against their gods?
Don't forget, the firstborn son was considered sacred in Egypt. He represented Horus, the god. So when Yahweh struck down all the firstborn, he was basically showing that he had absolute power over life and death. It's a big declaration that nobody, not even Pharaoh, is beyond his reach.
So it's not just a random act of cruelty, it's a targeted attack on the most sacred part of their society, a final proof that Yahweh is the ultimate authority. How does this final plague change Pharaoh's mind?
It finally breaks him. He's faced with this unimaginable grief, and his whole belief system has crumbled. He lets the Israelites leave, and they start their exodus toward freedom. But it's not a clean break, unfortunately. Pharaoh changes his mind again, probably out of pride or maybe desperation to hold on to his power, and he sends his army after them.
And that's where we get that iconic scene, right? The Israelites track between the Red Sea and the approaching Egyptian army. What a cliffhanger. It's the ultimate test of their newfound faith in Yahweh.
And in that moment of total desperation, we see this core theme emerge. The power of faith and trust in God, even when everything seems hopeless.
Yeah.
Guided by God, Moses stretches out his hand, and what happens? The sea parts. The Israelites walk across on dry land. It's incredible.
It's a miracle that defies all logic, a true testament to what belief can do. What happens to the Egyptians who are chasing them?
Well, their fate is sealed. They follow the Israelites right into the parted sea, but then the waters come crashing back down, drowning Pharaoh's whole army and setting the Israelites free from their pursuers.
Man, that parting of the Red Sea, it's just one of those moments that really sticks with you. It's not just an escape, it's like this powerful visual of God stepping in, protecting his people and, showing his judgment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a turning point for the Israelites. They've seen Yahweh's power firsthand now, not just in those plagues, but in this crazy, miraculous rescue. They've gone from slaves to a nation, forged in this crucible of oppression and delivered by God himself. That experience at the Red Sea, it's like the foundation for who they are and what they believe.
It makes you think about how those shared experiences, especially the really dramatic ones, shape a group's identity. So now they're free from Egypt, on their way to the Promised Land. What's that journey like? I mean, is it smooth sailing from here?
Well, not exactly. They end up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, facing hunger, thirst, you name it, even attacks from enemies. But throughout all these trials, the sources keep emphasizing that God is there, providing for them. He sends manna from heaven to feed them, guides them with a pillar of cloud during the day and fire at night, even provides water from a rock.
It's like this intense lesson in trusting God, relying on him for everything. There's got to be a ton of symbolism packed into all these events, right?
Oh, absolutely. That wilderness journey is not just about getting to a physical place. It's about spiritual growth. They're being tested, refined, learning what it means to be God's people.
And that's when we see the Ten Commandments, right? God giving them these laws, covenants, and rituals, like a moral framework for their lives.
Exactly. The Ten Commandments, those represent God's moral law, a guide for how to live in a right relationship with him and with each other. And then you have the covenant God makes with them, a promise of connection and blessings, as long as they stay faithful to him.
Those elements, the laws, the covenant, those are so important for them becoming a nation. But what about the rituals? What's their role in all of this and their relationship with God?
Well, the sources talk a lot about the construction of the tabernacle. That was like a portable sanctuary where they could worship Yahweh and experience his presence. Think of it as a mini temple, a visible reminder that God is with them on their journey. This is what lays the groundwork for the Israelite priesthood and the whole sacrificial system, all pointing to this need for atonement and getting right with God.
So there's this constant back and forth, right, between what God does and how the people respond. He provides, guides, protects, but he also expects them to obey, to be faithful, to keep learning and growing.
It's a dynamic relationship for sure, full of challenges, but also incredibly rewarding. And it's a relationship that keeps evolving throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament.
It's amazing how this story that started with the baby being rescued from death has become this epic narrative about a nation finding its identity, figuring out its relationship with God, developing its beliefs. It's a story that still speaks to us today, even after all these years.
It really does.
Yeah.
The story of Moses being called to lead, it's not just about one man or even one nation. It's like a glimpse into God's bigger plan to redeem all of humanity. A plan that unfolds through history and ultimately finds its fulfillment in Jesus.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the story of Moses, what are some key takeaways for us as listeners?
Well, for one, it reminds us that God is always at work in the world, even when things seem chaotic and messy. He calls us, just like he called Moses, to trust in his power, to follow his lead, and to let him shape us into the people he created us to be.
And maybe it also encourages us to think about our own journeys. We all face tough times, we struggle with doubts, and we all want to feel like our lives have a purpose. But the story of Moses reminds us that even when we're wandering in the wilderness, there's provision, guidance, and ultimately this promise of reaching the destination God has prepared for us. So as you go about your week, remember the power of faith, the importance of believing in something bigger than yourself, and the enduring impact of that Exodus story.